the grading method is just one element. It's the weapon that is used to keep students oppressed in the classroom. So you remove that, you remove the what I call the instrument of power, right?
It's an evil operation. Ask whoever you want, it's a legal occupation. America wants to pretend they're helping the children, but they just give Israelis the weapons to kill them. They give them the tanks for wrecking the buildings. The facts always come to light, you can never conceal them. Even as I spit and record this, people die and these evangelical Christians support it, forming an alliance with the Zionist lobby, while over here these spies are trying to stop me. We just want our people to live well. Israel equals
okay, so I'm pleased to be here with Professor Denis Rancourt, who's a professor at the University of Ottawa, who's been being persecuted in recent years for choosing to make certain decisions in the classroom that were displeasing to the powers that be. And I'm hoping that he can initially provide some context for the viewers as to why he's been encountering a crackdown from certain elites affiliated with the University of Ottawa and in the broader community, and then describe the most recent phase of his debacle, which has involved procedures in court. And so I'm very pleased to have you, Professor Denis Rancourt. Thanks for being with me today.
My pleasure to be with you, Joshua.
And so for people who don't know the background, the history of your debacle, why is it that you've been, could you characterize the history of your of the last few years, what you've been encountering as an academic, a prominent Canadian academic?
Well, I am someone who had a traditional career path. I was one of these, rising star academic physics researchers. I immediately obtained starting grants and some of the highest honors as a young faculty member, and I was promoted to first associate professor, then full professor in very short order, very short time. And my publication record was of a very high standard, even compared to some of my senior colleagues, as my chairman of the time used to like to say. But I'm someone who is never content as long as I see that there are things that need to be improved. And in particular, I was displeased about how the university was being run, in that we like to promote the false idea that we're actually educating people, and that our courses and our curricula actually provide education to young people. Where I came to understand, which is the same situation as myself when I look at myself, is that we only learn when we're motivated to do so. We only learn when the subject matter is of intrinsic interest to us and we've got reason to want to learn it. And the best way to achieve that is not necessarily to use the carrot and stick approach like the system likes to do. So I came to feel a disconnect between the lie that we were actually, that through our programs and through what we were delivering as a product, that we were actually helping people to develop their minds and their abilities and their analytical skills and so on. And the reality, the reality of the person, which is that's not how we learn. You can't just fill a person that way. You have to create an environment where the person will follow their interests and go deeply into things because they relate to them and they can see their relevance and how they're going to use them and how that's going to give them influence and power in the world and so on. So the political dimension is important in this because it relates to the power that we have in society. I started to more and more as I tried to improve my teaching and as I tried to follow the advice of various people with experience around me, I found that the advice was not producing results. It was just fine-tuning my approach so that the students would be happy in a system where they're not really learning. So I found that, you were taught to get good student evaluations. In other words, you were, and that part of that is, pleasing the students and giving them something that they're used to and going along with what they come to expect from the curriculum, rather than challenging them, asking them to question themselves, showing them that you are also questioning yourself, that you're uncertain. All of that very real interaction was absent. So as my career advanced, and I had two lives. I had my research life, and I was constantly asking myself, is this pointless, what's going on in the classroom, and how do I make it meaningful? And I came to study pedagogy, and I came to interact with people who had asked themselves these same questions, and I came to some conclusion that I needed to try some rather radical approaches in the classroom. And I started doing this in 2000. Well, I started trying to apply these techniques and really getting into it in about 2000, 2001. And then I had sort of a breaking point in 2004, where I decided that as of the next academic semester, I would, without compromise, apply pedagogical methods that were the ones recommended by the researchers that I most respected.
And what were they?
Well, it's an area called, in North America, it's called critical pedagogy. In Latin America, it's called pedagogy of liberation. They're the methods inspired by Paulo Freire and his phenomenal work as a pedagogue and as a sociologist. And basically, it's an approach where the student becomes conscious of their place in the world, their own power, their own ability to understand and to interact with both intellectual concepts, ideas, but also the world that they live in. And so there is necessarily a political dimension, even with regards to how the classroom is run, for example. And so I decided to create an environment where that could happen. And I decided to do it without, I was tired of just trying things and trying them halfway and seeing that the structures were limiting us and so on. And I decided in the fall of 2005 that the course that I was assigned to, I would just simply apply it. And I announced it to the world. And I had a website where I said, this is going to be called the Activism Course. That's the unofficial name. And we're going to do in the following way. And the community is invited to come into the classroom. Anybody can join us. In fact, we want your contributions. We want a true interaction with the community. We think that we can help each other in that way. We're going to have working groups. The students are going to decide on the curriculum. There will be no grading. I will not rank you for future employers or for the administration. I would not give a rank ordering of students. I refuse to do that. And so I set up some basic rules like that and asked the students at the first class, would you agree to this? Do you think that we can try this experiment? And the students were, they were wide-eyed, their jaws had dropped, and at this time they had been listening to me, and they just said, there was a bit of a silence, and then eventually someone said, yeah, and everyone said, yeah, we want to do this. And so it was very exciting, and they were very keen. The room was full. There were a lot of community members present, and it was going to be just a beautiful experiment in learning and in pedagogy. And the administration got wind of this thanks to the website, because I'd done this. I did this very openly, and I explained the reasons and so on very openly on the web. And so the VP academic, the vice president academic at the time, kind of, I guess, to put it in common language, kind of flipped out when he saw the website and how it was explaining the benefits of being radical in this approach and so on, and called and faxed the dean of my faculty and said, you've got to put a stop to this, basically. And so at the second class, the dean barged into the classroom unannounced to the students. And he was, you could say he was foaming at the mouth. He was red-faced.
And his name is Alan Rock, is that correct?
No, this was the dean of the Faculty of the Science at the time, back in 2005. His name was Christian Detellier. Alan Rock is a former Minister of Justice in Canada. He's presently the president of the University of Ottawa. He's the man that ultimately fired me and was the force behind my dismissal from my position as a full and tenured professor. But back then, we were dealing with a different administration, and so the dean of the Faculty of Science barges in and basically starts explaining to the students that this is not going to happen. He reads the course description to the students as though we were not going to follow it and says, "You're not doing this, and therefore this class is over, it's finished. And the next class, it will resume following the course description, even if we have to," basically he said, even if we, whatever we have to do, if we have to remove Professor Rancourt from the course, we will. And he just explained what his plan was for the course. But he didn't realize at the time that the room contained pretty much every single student activist on campus in that room, including many concerned community members and so on. And so they said, "Wait a minute, now thank you for informing us about your intentions, but we've got some questions for you." And they started blasting questions at him to the point where he backed out of the room, walking backwards and out through the door, and didn't come back. And then what followed that is a week of very intense negotiation between myself and the university administration. The dean had to come back into the classroom and explain that we were going to have the class exactly as we had intended, that this was the agreement we had worked out. And so we had a wonderful year, and we did exactly what we planned. And I had many students say that it was, shared to me, that it was a life-changing experience. And
so just to reiterate to the viewers, what you were basically trying to do is to iron out the kind of power structures that exist in the classroom. You were refusing to kind of conform to the hierarchical approach to education that, of course, our hierarchical society requires. And you were doing this by honing in on the grading methods. Is that correct? That it was mainly through the grading?
No, the grading method is just one element. It's the weapon that is used to keep students oppressed in the classroom. So you remove that, you remove what I call the instrument of power, right? But that wasn't the only way that I tried to remove the hierarchical structure. I also didn't stand in front of the class to lecture. I would sit among the students. And I told the students at the beginning of the course, I said, whenever you want to discuss something about the structure of the course or whatever you want to talk about, and you would prefer that I not be in the room, you just tell me and I'll leave. And they did that a couple of times. They asked me to leave, and they worked out things among themselves and then informed me about how it was going to be. So I did everything I could to, remove my obvious, per se power that comes from the fact that I'm older, a white male, and the professor, and to try to create a horizontal atmosphere with working groups and where members of the community could be interlaced with the students in these working groups, so that you had a sharing of knowledge and a sharing of experience, and so that a lot of the motivation would come from that as well. And I had also rewritten the book. This was a course that was originally, Physics and the Environment was the title. So I rewrote the textbook because I found it was inadequate, and I called it Science for Activists. And I actually had a textbook like that we were using that went through all the basic science concepts I thought were useful to someone in society to understand basic things about how things work around you, and so that when you hear a talking head expert on the TV, you can judge for yourself if they're making any sense, if it relates to technology or science, you see. So there were all these things happening all at once, and it was a very lively experiment, and it was a great success. But following that, the university even though they had allowed the course, they chose to discipline me. And they charged me with having subverted the intention of a university course.
Wow.
And so that discipline went to arbitration. It went to a labor tribunal, and my union defended me in that discipline case, and I won that case, and I won it with flying colors. The arbitrator found that everything I had implemented was protected under the purview of my academic freedom, and that the university's position that I had subverted the purpose of the course could not be sustained